Okay. All right, let her rip.
Yeah.
Every day I see miserable people doing things they hate just to fit in. I know it's easier to get along peacefully, but have you ever thought about you? Don't know why I keep on doing what I'm told to do when the rules are made up by someone we never knew. Baby, wipe your tears and hear me out. We don't need someone to feel alright. Let's do the streets on a Monday. Let's call your exes and tell them they can join us too. Why always worry about money when you can get rich by trying to see the other side?
Wow. Welcome, everyone. So glad to have you here on a Monday. We have an exciting topic to discuss, alimony, whether it's cheaper to keep them or not. And I'm here with my wonderful producer, Pamela Lane Nichols, talented author, speaker, and fabulous coach. So I'm just glad to have everybody here tonight, and hopefully we can share some insights and helpful information for everyone that's joining us.
Yeah, well, it's great to be back with you, Attorney Lenore, to talk about this juicy, hot topic that most people are confused about. I know that I was when I was going through my own process. And the way that this show works is if you're joining us live, you can simply put into the chat your question, Dear Attorney Lenore, on the topic of divorce and alimony. Is it cheaper to keep him or her? And I will read those out loud. We have the privilege of some questions that came in earlier, so we're going to jump right in to the first question that we have for you, Attorney Lenore.
Wonderful. Okay. So,
Dear, how does alimony work? Oh, there's got a lot of interesting things going on the screen. Do you see that?
no, I do not.
Okay.
I guess that's a
Okay.
good thing for me.
It's just on my end then. Dear Attorney Lenore, so how does alimony work? Dear Attorney Lenore, I don't know a lot about alimony, but my girlfriend told me that she had to pay her husband $1,200 per month for 6 years. How is that even possible when he made more money than she did? Can you explain how alimony works? Sincerely confused. Well.
Yeah. Yes. Alimony is a hot button for a lot of people. And every state is a little different. I only practice in Pennsylvania, so I can only speak to Pennsylvania. But the purpose of alimony is to equalize the playing fields between the parties. And in Pennsylvania, there are 11 factors that they look at to determine whether or not alimony is appropriate. And those factors are the health and welfare of each party, the ability for the party to support themselves outside of the marriage, also whether or not they have the same education, whether or not someone was a homemaker. It doesn't mean that you aren't entitled to alimony if you were a homemaker, whether or not you're going to be the main custodian of a child, and what other things you're going to get in the settlement of the assets, what other assets you have in your individual name that could help you, what inheritances you might be getting. And I know there's a few more, but all of they look at a 360-degree view to determine whether or not that seems appropriate. And not every factor is weighed the same. And I know a lot of people sit there and say, well, they cheated on me. Why do I have to pay them alimony? Well, in Pennsylvania, it's a no-fault divorce state. And though one of the factors in weighing alimony, one of those factors is whether or not someone is at fault in the marriage, it's not the only factor. So for the most part, even if they cheated on you, if they're the dependent spouse, they may get alimony. A lot of courts try to avoid alimony in some respects because it keeps the parties connected for a long time. And but sometimes they use it because there's not enough assets to divide, or someone wants to keep a major asset and they don't want to divide it. So the courts will say, well, over time, we will have you pay a certain amount, and we'll call it alimony. Now, it used to be that there were tax breaks for alimony, that it was includable to someone's income and deductible to the person who's paying it. And that sometimes was an advantage. Well, that's not the fact anymore. It's not a tax inclusion or deduction. So
when did that take place?
It's been a while.
Really?
Yeah.
So maybe more than 5 years?
Yeah, more than 5 years.
Okay, because I had to include it on my taxes.
Right. It's been about seven years, maybe.
Okay.
They changed it. And so yeah, and that was tough for the dependent spouse. It was, it was bad enough that you weren't making as much, but then you had to pay taxes on it too. And that was in Pennsylvania. But so it just depends on the state. It depends on the factors of your case. It depends on what the whole equitable distribution picture is going to look like. And it is a thorn in people's side. It definitely is a thorn.
So, Lenore, should this person be worried that while the spouse made more than she still had to pay alimony? Is that even, maybe that was a different state's configuration, but is that even possible?
Well, as I said, it could be that it was a different state's configuration. It could be that she wanted to keep an asset instead of selling it. And so she could be sort of buying him out of that asset over time.
I see. So can you give an example? Like, you say asset, just for those who are not clear what that is, you mean like a house, owning a house?
It could be owning a house. It could be a retirement fund. They would say, I don't want to roll my 401k over to you. And I only accumulated this much during the marriage in my 401k. And rather than give you a share of that, I'll pay you out over time.
Interesting. Okay. So that's really interesting that it's possible, because I think many people have the assumption that no matter what, if you make more than your spouse, you're going to pay your spouse alimony. That's not hard, not a hard fact. Not okay.
No, and again, it also depends on how the assets get divided,
Yeah.
whether or not if you might be the dependent spouse, but you might have a huge trust fund. And even though your
Right.
spouse makes more than you, the courts may look at that as a factor that no, alimony isn't warranted here.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let us not even assume that alimony is guaranteed.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's not guaranteed. Okay. And the other question that I had, I think you answered it, is do the courts weigh equally those 11 factors, or it all depends on the weight those individual factors get?
It all depends. Just like most things in the law. All depends.
Yeah, you're right. Okay. All right. That's a great answer. Let's go to the next question that comes up for dear Attorney Lenore.
Okay.
Deadbeat spouse. I love that. we already know what's coming. Dear
Yeah.
Attorney Lenore, my husband and I have been married for 5 years. I earn the highest income between us. He has intentionally not worked in high-paying jobs, although he could have, because he wanted to devote time to building his own business. That business has never taken off. I don't want to pay him alimony for sitting on his butt for 5 years. Am I obligated to support a man who hasn't pulled his weight? Sincerely, not giving him a dime. Okay.
Well,
Oh.
and I want to stand corrected. There's 17. I don't know why I said 11. There's 17 factors in Pennsylvania.
Wow, that's a lot of factors,
Yeah,
Lenore.
that's a lot of factors. So, what he sat on it. So he might have been able to do more, but you might not be able to prove that. You might have thought he needed to go out and get a better job, but if he didn't prove that he had that earning capacity at any point in his life, I think you might be stuck.
So define earning capacity for us. When you use that term, what does it mean?
So it means what you could possibly earn based on your education, experience, and abilities. So the thing is, you might have a doctorate in something amazing, but it doesn't necessarily pay a lot. It might be that all it pays is a stipend from a college. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to you have that earning capacity. Or maybe you were a big executive 15 years ago, but you stayed at home to raise the children. And now you have to get back in the workforce. You've lost your connections, you've lost your experience. People have already put in time and jumped ahead of you. Doesn't necessarily mean you can just step right in and earn what you used to earn. So it really, you have to look at everything, just not the paycheck. It could be, like in some cases I've had, someone was making tons of money, was really, really smart, but then they had a traumatic brain injury. So
Yikes.
they're not going to be able to come back. They're not going to be able to do what they used to do.
Okay, so let me play the devil's advocate on behalf of this person who wrote in. Okay, so she's saying her husband could have earned at his capacity, but intentionally did not. So let's say, I'm going to make it up, I don't know her actual story, but let's say that he was a PhD, a psychologist, okay? And he could have gotten well-paying jobs, over six figures, but he chose instead to work as a clerk at Walmart. So he's really working well below his capacity intellectually and financially. Does she have any recourse here?
Well, certainly, I mean, there's going to be the conjecture that he could earn more. So in those situations, someone would get an expert to say, well, based on their experience or their education or their age, they should, even at a starting position, be getting, making this amount of money, not minimum wage. And you could present that at court, and that is earning capacity. It's not necessarily what you get in your paycheck. It's what you have the capability of earning. So you do have recourse. Yeah. It's expensive to sometimes get the experts, but in some courts, the hearing officer will go on monster.com and say, okay, well, someone with your earning capacity, your experience, and your, and your education, you would have this earning capacity. And I'm going to I'm going to say, this is what you should be earning, even if all you're doing is going and working at Walmart as a clerk.
Yeah. Okay. If you're just joining us, welcome to Dear Attorney Lenore's show. We're tackling the topic, divorce and alimony. Is it cheaper to keep him or her, depending? If you have a question on this topic, feel free to put it in the chat. Dear Attorney Lenore, ask your question, and then I will read it out loud to Attorney Lenore, and she will break it down for you. With that said, let's go to the next question that was asked earlier. Reducing alimony. Dear Attorney Lenore, my wife and I are getting a divorce. She wants it. I begged her not to leave. I did a little research and learned that I may have to pay her alimony if she leaves me. Why should I financially support someone who doesn't want to be with me? Sincerely, not giving up easily. Okay. Oh, dear Attorney
again, that's the lament that so many people have, even when you're dividing assets. I don't want this. I've worked really hard to get this. Why do I have to share it with this person if they're the ones that want the divorce and I don't? Again, in states like Pennsylvania, where it's a no-fault divorce, that factor, in dividing assets, fault is not a factor at all. And again, with alimony in Pennsylvania, it's one of 17 factors. So it really gets lost in the shuffle. They are really looking at the economics and what would create an equitable solution for these parties. So a lot of times what would be equitable is, well, you made all of the money and this person has enjoyed the marriage with you, but maybe you're just not somebody that is easy to live with. Maybe you're, like we talked about last week, a narcissist, and it's unbearable to live with you. And I went out and I've given up so much of my career, raising the kids, or I didn't pursue my career because you needed me to support you in whatever way till you got your education. There's so many factors. That's why there's 17 factors to look at. I deserve some compensation for what I contributed to the marriage to allow you to make as much as you did. Now, again, courts a lot of times will try and avoid alimony and divide the estate in a way that would compensate for what alimony would have been, because it's a clean break, because it doesn't feel so painful that somebody still has their hand in your pocket when they've broken your heart. And it just allows two people to go on with their lives. So yeah, it's a bitter pill. It is a bitter pill to swallow. And again, it's different in every state. I can only speak to Pennsylvania. And the thing is, this is why mediation or collaborative law is helpful, because it allows people to process all of these emotions, to hear what the other person is saying, to validate what each person is feeling, and to come up with a compromise that works best for everybody. Because at some point, these two people loved one another. And if there's children involved, it might be the stay-at-home spouse needs some time to get back on their feet. And in mediation or collaborative law, they're working together to create two homes that the child's comfortable in. And so litigation is really going to add fuel to the flame with hurt feelings and betrayal and all of those things. And it will make people not want to pay alimony even more in a litigation situation. But if you would take it to mediation or collaborative law, I think people's better angels and cooler heads can prevail.
Let me ask a question about that. Let's just go down a dark alley for a second. The courts established that the higher income earner has to pay the lower income earner alimony. And then a year in to the alimony payments, the payor is like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm not paying her or him another dime, because they get upset about whatever. And they decide, and they stop paying alimony. What happens?
Well, the payee, the person that should be getting the alimony, would file petitions of contempt with court, and the courts would hear the case, and if the courts think this person is capable of continuing to make these payments, they're going to make them make those payments. Either they're going to, garnish their wages, or attach their property, or put them in jail.
Oh, okay. So if you have to pay alimony and the courts put that as an order or as a requirement, you best to just go ahead and do that. Yeah. Even if you get upset and you're angry and you don't think that she or he should be getting that alimony, it really is far more costly not to fulfill on that obligation than it is to fulfill on it.
Most definitely.
Okay.
I mean, you can appeal these things, and you can possibly file for reconsideration and to modify and all of those things. But it's a lot of time and energy. And again, that's why it's better. That's why mediation and collaborative law is better, but also that is often why courts will forego alimony in favor of a different division of the marital estate, because it's just, you don't get into this stickiness of people not following through.
Yeah, right. And let's not forget the impact of this behavior on the children. If there are children involved, the fight over alimony before and during could be extremely stressful on kids, and affecting how they see the world, life, themselves, and their future.
Oh, definitely, because they see their parents stressed over money, and if they're young kids, they will end up, because little kids feel like they control the universe, will somehow feel responsible, or even if they're older, they may feel neglected. Like, why
Mhm.
would mom or dad not pay alimony? Or they may even think, well, I have to side with the person with the deep pockets. Otherwise, I'm going to end up like the parent that doesn't get the money.
And that is painful.
Yes.
Painful for the recipient of alimony if their child favors and sides with the payer of alimony. That's a very painful experience. But while we're talking about children and alimony, can you just distinguish for us alimony versus child support, and then we'll go on to the next question.
So child support is for food, clothing, and shelter for the child. And most states have some sort of formulation that they come up with a calculation based on the party's incomes and the number of children, and the infinite wisdom of the legislature that this is how much people should be spending on their children to support them in these certain income brackets. And so there's an actual like mathematical calculation for that, unless it's a really high income case. And then there's certainly a lot more discretion with that. Alimony is payment between spouses after the divorce. Now, in Pennsylvania, there is something called spousal support, and that's what is paid between spouses before the divorce. And there actually is a mathematical calculation to determine what spousal support is. But alimony in Pennsylvania is discretionary with regard to amount and term. And the courts look to these 17 factors, not 11, 17 factors to determine what is the appropriate amount of alimony, if any.
Okay, so that sounds to me that if, let's just take a wife who's the lower income earner, between she and her spouse, can be rather strategic here, depending on the state, okay? Let's say this state is Pennsylvania that awards spousal support, alimony, and child support. This spouse could very well say, you know what? I'm going to roll on out of this relationship. I'm not going to divorce, but I'm going to file for spousal support before I divorce him. And then alimony potentially when we are divorced, and then definitely child support to the max that I can get based on the number of kids. I mean, that could be a strategy that any person who thinks that they have more of they'll probably get more favor. I hate to use that word. That's not a word you would use, but in terms of them being the lower income earner, there's a strategy there that they could apply that could maximize the money from their spouse.
Yes, that is possible. Now, the interesting thing in Pennsylvania is fault is something that can prevent somebody from getting spousal support. So if the there are fault grounds that a party can prove, say, bigamy, or adultery, insanity, in certain cases, things like that, if they can prove that there are fault grounds, then spousal support won't be awarded. But there's this hybrid stepchild called alimony pendente lite, alimony pending the litigation. And that can be awarded without regard to fault, because the goal of that is to put parties on equal footing during the litigation. The thing about that is that can't run forever. So the courts are going to push the divorce case forward. And even if spousal support is awarded, the court's going to push the case forward, because in a state like Pennsylvania, after 1 year of separation, a party can move to push the case forward in the courts. They can't just sit on their hands. So they can't, one party can't hold everything up by sitting on their hands. I'm not sure what other states are, but most states have a situation where you can't just not let the other person move forward with the divorce. There's mechanism to do that.
So whether or not you want it, you can't hold it up once the paperwork has been filed by one party.
Not forever. For a period of time you can, but like in Pennsylvania, it used to be 2 years. You couldn't force somebody to get divorced for 2 years from the date of separation. But within the past 5 to 7 years, they've changed that to it being 1 year of separation.
Okay. And in that time, that 1 year, it's possible that a spouse could be receiving spousal support during that time.
Yes. Spousal
could
support,
they also,
or alimony pendente lite if
pendente lite. Okay.
If they don't
couldn't they also
qualify? Go ahead.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
gotcha. I'm sorry, but this is so exciting. People you talk about alimony is exciting. But they could also in that time be getting child support too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
so
definitely.
Again, there is a strategy here if you really want to milk the system, if you really want to stick it to your spouse as well. It's possible because seems like there's ways around the system, so to speak. Is that fair to say?
There's ways to be strategic about it, and it might. So now the independent spouse may feel like the dependent spouse is milking the system. The dependent spouse might be thinking, I can't make it, and I need, and he or she doesn't want to give me anything. I need to be able to get back on my feet, and if this is what I'm entitled to under the system to help me get back on my feet, I'm going to do this for me and the kids, or just me. So there are two sides to that. The one side that's paying is thinking that person's milking the system, but the other person that's getting the money is saying, I'm just trying to survive.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, if you're just now joining us, welcome to the Dear Attorney Lenore show. We are tackling the very hot and sometimes confusing and frustrating topic called divorce and alimony. Is it cheaper to keep him or her? And Attorney Lenore is breaking down that question in multiple parts. Let's go to the next question that was asked. Not going to pay a cheater. Dear Attorney Lenore, my wife was having an affair for years, but I stayed with her. She promised she would stop seeing this guy, but I found out that she never has. Now she wants to divorce me to be with him. She claims I will have to pay her alimony. I don't want to give her a dime. Am I legally obligated to pay a cheater? Sincerely, the victim.
Hear that so many times. Again, it depends on where you are in the process. If you're in Pennsylvania, you could limit how much spousal support you would pay because there is a fault ground. After the divorce, it's one of 17 factors, the fault ground. So the courts look more at the economics than the morality of the situation. I mean, that is really the bottom line. They look at the economics, and that is a hard pill for someone to swallow. That this person betrayed you all of this time while you were out, breaking your back to support the family, and now you still have to support them. Possibly. And that's that's hard to take. I mean, no fault divorce has been around since 1980. So there's very few of us that can remember the Peyton Place divorces that used to be, dragging people's name through the mud, or in order to get a divorce, you had to just prove fault, or go to a foreign country or things like that. So that's why we have no fault divorce, because it accepts the reality that sometimes people have to move on, and it shouldn't be so costly and painful. And that is why fault isn't weighed as heavily as it used to be. But again, it's a tough pill to swallow. It really is.
How would you handle this couple if they chose to come to mediation with you, for example, and the husband is feeling as strongly as he is about his wife wanting to leave and be with somebody else, although he may possibly have to pay alimony? How would you even approach a very difficult emotional state that they're both in?
I would certainly have them focus on the economics, but in a way that the two of you contributed to the creation of this marital estate. And certainly if there's children, listen, the kids are going to have to go back and forth, and you need for them to feel good in either parent's house. I would definitely suggest that each of them needs to go through counseling, to deal with that grief and that betrayal and all of that. But I would, in addition, remind them to get legal advice so that they understand that even if they duke it out in court, it's not going to be that much different. So let's just cut to the chase. Let's make the best decision possible for each of you so that you can go forward, as tough as that is. And it is, people do get upset with the cheating, but they are still some people that really are more attached with who earned it more than cheating. I mean, it's my money. I worked for it. You are not getting it. No, that's it. I mean, I actually did recently have a couple come to me wanting mediation, but the one spouse said, "You will never get my retirement. And if you think that you're going to get my retirement, we are not going to mediate, and I will spend all the money I have to protect that." So somebody like that, and I tried, and they had kids, and it really caused discord with the children. But some people get just focused on things that, and in the grand scheme of things, it would have been less expensive for them just to go through mediation and share that asset in a different way, in an offset with a different division of an asset, where the retirement may not have been touched, but there was something more that the spouse got from somewhere else. But so, principles are expensive. Venting your spleen is expensive. And really, I would say I would try and see if I could get the parties to at least validate to one another what led them there. That, I'm sorry that I did this, but I've been so unhappy, and you deserve better, and we should have gotten divorced sooner. And, the other person saying, yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't there for you the way you needed me to be. And maybe just
Yeah.
that in and of itself could be enough for them to say, okay, let's just let each other go so we can live our lives. But that's
Yeah,
easier said than done.
You're right, but it's a very good point, because sometimes what we need more is validation, and we are willing to fight tooth and nail to get that validation, even if it means making sure to the death that the other spouse pays financially. If you're not going to validate me, then I'm going to make sure you're going to pay out your wazoo for what you caused me. So that is a very important point that you're making, and I don't want it to get lost in the emotional upset that happens in these kinds of situations. We do, Attorney Lenore, have a live question here, so I'm going to read it to you. Dear Attorney Lenore, do we have marriage or divorce insurance companies which covers all the expenses involved in divorce or marriage? I love this question because I had the same one myself. And follow up to that is, since sometimes expenses for divorce is more than alimony for support money involved. Yeah. So what are your thoughts about divorce insurance companies?
Well, I'm sure the insurance companies are thinking, what? There's another way. They could make a lot of money on that. But I would think or maybe not. I would think insurance companies would say that's a bad bet for us to insure marriages, because 50% of marriages end in divorce. Like, why would we do that? I think for people, if you want insurance, for the divorce, it's called a prenuptial agreement. That is the best way that, and you see that all the time with really wealthy stars, but lots of regular people do it too, where people say, okay, if we get divorced, God forbid, this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to divide things. This is how we're going to figure out child support or alimony, or how long it's going to be. That is the closest thing you can get to divorce insurance, is a prenuptial agreement.
And I think of divorce insurance in the way of, okay, we're going to get married. We don't have a prenup. We didn't do the prenup, darn it, but we're married. And we, in the event that we do get a divorce, we have some kind of insurance to help pay for the divorce. It's money to help us pay that we've invested in, like you do insurance, or premiums we paid. In the event we get divorced, then we make a claim on our insurance to help pay for some of the costs. I've thought about that so many times and thought, man, could we make some money here?
Well,
provide insurance for people who want a divorce.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that, but again, I thought about it like, oh, that's a great when I never thought about it till somebody said that right now. But if you get if you could get an insurance company to do that, I think they would have already thought how to do that. I really think insurance companies don't do that because it won't pay. Just like they won't insure people now, in Hurricane Alley.
Wow.
So since divorce is so prevalent, they probably won't. They wouldn't do it.
So the raw answer to that question is there are no insurance companies that will pay for divorce.
No, I've never heard of them.
They don't exist right now.
Yeah, I've never heard of them, and I would think they wouldn't do it because it's too big of a risk. So,
but I guess to this person's question, and a follow-up question I'll ask in a second, to this person's question, because it gets at the heart of it's expensive. Like divorce can be expensive, but your point is, yes, it can be expensive, but you can manage those expenses if you choose the best way to divorce, which one way choice is mediation and or collaborative divorce, right? Those are, if expense is an issue, then don't litigate, mediate, right? That's your course anyway.
That's that exactly. That is my course. Exactly. Because with mediation, and certainly with the programs I offer, you know what the cost is going to be. I have my programs are flat fee. And so it's not going to be that you don't, you go to court and all of a sudden you get this $20,000 bill. It's not good.
Right.
And you'll be in control of the process. The two of you are in control and you decide how it goes. It's not one person, dragging the other person back and forth to court. And even in collaborative law, it might be a little more expensive, but still it's contained. It's contained between the parties, and they have one goal to manage the costs and come up with a resolutions that's the best possible. There are also our postnuptial agreements. There are agreements that even after the marriage, people can say, you know what, let's have let's come up with a postnuptial agreement because either there's investments that they're trying to protect, or there's problems in the marriage, and while they might want to work on the marriage, they also don't want this specter of financial ruin hanging over their attempt to work on their marriage.
Okay, let's go to the next question, dear Attorney Lenore. Can we get? Oh, I'm sorry, Zoom Master. I have a question in the chat. I'm going to pull up first, if you don't mind. Thank you. Can we get that prenuptial agreement after marriage is done, or during marriage is the question. Is there such a thing? I guess it would be a in nuptial agreement. It wouldn't be prenup, because prenup is before marriage, but they're asking, can we get some kind of
postnuptial agreement? That's what it is. It's called a postnuptial agreement. And yes, you can. And
okay.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I'm drafting one for a couple now.
While you're yet married?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So that's
you can definitely do that.
That is possible. And you're capable of doing. Of course, you're capable of doing it. What am I saying? This is what you do.
Right.
Part of what you do. All right. The other question, dear Attorney Lenore, my spouse wants me to come or talk through legal. No mediation. I suppose they mean lawyers. He has a lawyer, she has a lawyer. That's the problem. Everything she wants me to come through is with a lawyer or court. So this spouse does not want to do mediation. They want to duke this thing out with lawyers or a court. What do you say to that?
Well, I would say that, perhaps they don't understand that there's other options. Okay. They may not, it may be that there's too much emotionality to mediate, but there's always the possibility of collaborative law, where you do have someone that will, help advocate for you, but still work to come together for what's going to be best for everybody. And it doesn't hurt to have a consultation. And if you're talking to somebody saying, listen, the more money we save on attorneys, the more money each of us will have, and we'll have control over this process. I mean, you can always end the collaborative process and go back to court. It's a better way to deal with it. And you have time to think about your decisions and not feel rushed or have a situation out of your control.
Yeah. And so the follow-up to that they're saying that the spouse doesn't have lawyers. She's not working, that she wants this husband to pay for her lawyers. And this is an immigration. She's an immigrant, I guess. I guess he is too. So the challenge there is, she's wanting him to take care of everything, but she wants to go through lawyers exclusively. And let me just throw this in really quickly. I can't help but think that there might be her concern that in the absence of a lawyer for herself, there's no one really to advocate for what she wants, and that her voice might get drowned in this entire process, especially if she's, the dependent spouse. That typically happens. You don't feel like someone's going to fight for you, so you're going to need that lawyer to fight for you.
Right. And I mean, the court sometimes will order a spouse to pay for the other party's attorney, but not often, unfortunately. So for that person, I would say definitely look into collaborative law, because it's something that both everybody signs an agreement how things are going to work. You talk about the fees. I mean, if it's going to be ultimately less expensive to go through collaborative law than to litigate, and the dependent spouse wants to feel protected, like they have somebody legally explaining things to them and making sure that they are protected, collaborative law is a great solution. And for the wage earning spouse, it's cheaper to do it that way, because you're not paying to go in court and litigate every little thing and sit around and wait for the judge, and that those costs go exponential. But if you agree, okay, let's try collaborative, and I will even pay the fees of collaborative so that you feel comfortable. I think that's a win-win.
Yeah, it sounds to me that this individual would do well by he and his wife having a consultation, like with you, on the options that are available. Because you've already given us two. We know you can litigate, you can mediate, you can do collaborative, and that might be really helpful for them to sit down with someone who's compassionate like you and knowledgeable, so you can help her and him understand, here are your options, here are the pros and cons of those options, because it sounds like the wife could really get what she's asking for from her spouse by the collaborative experience, but she may not even understand what's possible.
True. I mean, I think that's the thing. And it might be something where if they're at a point where they're not listening to one another, at least go to couples counseling. Like start there. Go to couples counseling, and maybe in that way the therapist can help each of them hear one another and talk through what might be the next steps that they should pursue.
And what if this is a standoff? Like, no, I'm not going to go to couples counseling. No, I'm not going to mediate. No, I'm not going to talk to you. This is what I want. And listen very carefully. I want a lawyer. I want you to pay for the lawyer. And that's it. Like, there's no conversation outside of that. Like, what does one even do with that?
Well, it depends on, which spouse you are. I mean, if you're the spouse that feels that that person isn't going to negotiate, and that you're kind of giving them, the knife to gore you with, I mean, you might be like, no, I'm just going to go to court. Why would I pay for you to, like use that against me.
Mhm.
Or you can say, this is what I'm going to pay for. I will pay for a collaborative law consultation, and you can go if you want. But if you don't go, then yeah, I'm going to go get my own lawyer, and you're going to have to figure out how to get a lawyer, which is really,
Yeah.
I mean, it will not be the best option for either one of them, but that might be, the way to get somebody to come to the table. Now, if you're the dependent spouse, I think that, you know, you're better off trying to go a mediation or collaborative route, because
Mhm.
it's less expensive, it's less inflamed, and you
Mhm.
actually might be able to get somebody, the other person, to be more reasonable, because they're not feeling as threatened as they would in a
Mhm.
litigation case in court.
Yeah, yeah. And I would offer to this individual who's struggling with the spouse taking a very hard line, something completely unconventional here, because it sounds like she is very, very angry about something, and we don't know what it is. We're not privy to it. But if the spouse could try to get to the heart of why his spouse is so upset that she takes this very hardline position, and then find within himself how to validate her. And this is kind of tricky, because you have to come from a very different place, not to blame, not to point a finger, but a place of, I think I understand why you're taking this position. Because if you can come from there, you might open the door to communication in the way that you're hoping and wanting it to happen. And as a woman, both of us are women, we can certainly understand. We could certainly open up a little bit if we felt that way, and that takes a very bold move to do. But anyway, it's something to offer on the path to divorce. And go ahead, Attorney Lenore, and then
It
we'll wrap
is,
this up,
and
because we're close
that's,
to.
yeah, and that's why I would say, couples therapy is, good way to start. One other thing I just thought of is, as a compromise, you could offer, I'll pay for a consultation. You want to know what your rights are, and you want to know what you need to look for. And I'll pay for a consultation. I will pay for your
Yeah, yeah.
consultation.
Mhm.
And you tell them that these are the things I want to look into: collaborative law and
Mhm.
mediation,
Yeah,
um, and get the information. I will pay for you to
yeah.
get the information. That could be a compromise
That could
where
be
that person would at least feel like, okay, now I know what I'm up against.
Yeah, yeah. And that could serve as an olive branch. You're right. That very well could
Mhm.
put. Well, we have run out of time, Attorney Lenore. This is yet another fascinating conversation. We won't be able to get to the other questions that came in earlier, but we've had a great time engaging the live questions. So, Attorney Lenore, would you like to close out and say anything to those listening? Something to encourage us all in this divorce and alimony situation.
Well, I want to say that there are ways to reach compromise and agreements, um, and that, alimony is a validating tool within divorce, and but it is not the only way to divide an estate, or to um, equitably divide your property and debts. It's a tool, and
Yeah.
the key here is not to get emotionally attached to the concept of this. You started out, both of you loving one another, you built things together,
Yeah.
and there's no reason necessarily to burn it down. But in communicating with one another, it's best to be clear, concise, and calm, to reach the best resolutions.
So Attorney Lenore, why don't we ask our Zoom master to put up the slide where a a reduced fee consultation can be provided to those who are interested. Your fee is typically $350 for 60 minutes, but you're reducing it just for the show guests. That's a steal.
Yes.
$100 if you are an attendee
$100.
of this show. Yes, that's a
Yes,
steal. I'm
and
trying to tell you.
yeah, and I'm happy to do that. In addition, if you go to my website, you will see that we are promoting our course, Don't Litigate, Mediate. And if you have any interest in that, please fill out the information form and we'll be happy to keep you updated about when that's launching. But there is a way to do it differently. And I'm happy to help show you how to divorce differently and have it not be so painful for the two of you, because it can be peaceful, even though it seems impossible.
And the way to reach Attorney Lenore is divorcedonedifferently, PA @gmail.com. All right,
Yes.
Zoom Master, take us out.